Good evening. The impact of that Downing Street party email that ITV News revealed last night is still being felt today. To recap, the Prime Minister, his wife and around 100 of his staff were emailed back in May 2020 inviting them to a party in the garden of Downing Street. They were even told to bring your own bottle. Back then, we were in strict lockdown. People were unable to be with their sick loved ones, arranging funerals they couldn't attend, and being fined for breaking the rules. The Met Police are under pressure to investigate the party, and Prime Minister Boris Johnson has gone to ground, as our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
Central London was still dark when Boris Johnson's Range Rover delivered him to Downing Street after an early morning run, and there he stayed, out of sight for the rest of the day. It was on May the 20th, 2020, Martin Reynolds, the PM's principal private secretary, emailed Downing Street staff. "Hi all," he said, "after what has been an incredibly busy period, we thought it would be nice to make the most of this lovely weather and have some socially distanced drinks in the number 10 garden this evening." He added, "Please join us from 6 p.m. and bring your own booze." If you wanted to hold an illegal secret party, the back garden at Downing Street might not seem an obvious choice. But it is hidden from prying eyes, behind a high brick wall and not overlooked by tall buildings. Today, the Downing Street complex looked less than hospitable in the January drizzle. But on May the 20th, 2020, London and the South East enjoyed a heat wave. At Southend-on-Sea, hundreds of families did their best to stay 2 metres apart on the beach. In South London, Arita Godoy was being cremated after dying in hospital from COVID. Her daughter Alejandra couldn't go to the funeral and couldn't be at her mother's bedside.
Obviously respected the wishes of the Prime Minister.
Do you wish you hadn't now?
Yeah, I do. I regret actually not being by her side. I regret for the rest of my life, really. I wish I'd never really followed it.
How angry are you now you know what was going on?
Angry and upset. Very angry with him. He needs to do the right thing, resign.
In the Commons, Labour demanded the Prime Minister answer questions, but a junior minister was dispatched instead to take the flak. Tory MPs were thin on the ground, but Labour MPs lined up to put the boot in. One wanted an apology on behalf of a constituent who was alone in a maternity ward on party day.
Mum and baby had to stay in hospital due to complications, and they weren't allowed any visitors at all. She was lonely and isolated, and her baby was struggling to feed. Her husband didn't see the baby again until he was 4 days old.
Of course that's a matter of personal regret, but it's not appropriate to prejudge the investigation that's in progress.
My question to the Minister is, if the Prime Minister knowingly misled Parliament about the existence of this or any other party, will he resign, as the Minister of Coal says he should?
She is mischaracterising the position and she's jumping the gun. So I think it's best not to make political points, but rather to wait for Sue Gray's investigation.
The Chancellor was the next-door neighbour. Did he know about the event in Downing Street on the 20th of May 2020, and did he attend the event himself?
I do not know, and I presume that can be a question that Sue Gray can inquire into.
London's mayor was asked if the Met would launch a criminal investigation.
The Met Police Service will follow the evidence. There does appear to be evidence of rules being broken. It's already been made public. The Met Police Service speaking to the Cabinet Office. Let's wait and see what happens with those conversations.
Tomorrow, Boris Johnson has an appointment he can't swerve. Prime Minister's questions in Parliament. Simon Harris, ITV News, Downing Street.
Well, Simon has joined us to talk more about this. We, of course, know that Boris Johnson perhaps will come under fire at PMQs tomorrow. But, you know, Boris Johnson has survived scandal since he was London mayor, hasn't he? But can he survive this?
Well, it's often been said he's got something of a Teflon coat. There are anecdotes from people who know him that say that whatever scrapes he gets into, he has this self-belief that everything will turn out all right in the end. But this does feel different. He must know whether he was at that party. It's a simple yes or no. And if it's yes, it's hard to see it as anything other than a flagrant breach of the COVID rules the rest of us were told to obey. Now, for the moment, the government is sticking to the rigid line that all questions about parties will be answered by Sue Gray's inquiry. That doesn't feel sustainable. Ironically, though, if the police get involved, Sue Gray's inquiry might be put on the back burner as a criminal investigation would take precedence.
OK, Simon, thank you.
Good evening. The Prime Minister has admitted for the first time that he was at drinks in the garden at number 10 Downing Street in May 2020. He told MPs he was sorry and regretted it, and in hindsight, he would have done things differently. A reminder that at that time in London, we were only allowed to meet one other person outside and not in your garden. But in his defence, the Prime Minister says he didn't know it was a party. He thought it was a work event. Watching that apology in his constituency in Uxbridge, there was a little acceptance of that from voters, but not much. Our political correspondent, Simon Harris, reports.
Boris Johnson has been in tight spots before, but this was his trickiest. What would or could he say to try to shore up his position?
Mr. Speaker, I want to apologise.
Those are words we rarely hear from Mr. Johnson, and so to his explanation of why he was at a garden party at number 10 during lockdown.
I went into that garden just after 6 on the 20th of May 2020 to thank groups of staff before going back into my office 25 minutes later to continue working. I believed implicitly that this was a work event. But, Mr. Speaker, with hindsight, I should have sent everyone back inside. I should have found some other way to thank them.
He's finally been forced to admit what everyone knew, that when the whole country was locked down, he was hosting boozy parties in Downing Street. Yes. Is he now going to do the decent thing and resign?
The answer to that was no, but Boris Johnson's apology may not be enough to save him. His immediate fate is probably in the hands of Conservative MPs. They, in turn, will be testing the mood of their constituents to see if voters buy the Prime Minister's excuse that it wasn't a party but a work event, and that he's genuinely sorry. In Boris Johnson's West London constituency, they were digesting his performance in Poppy Andy's cafe.
Was it an apology? Did he actually apologise? I don't know. It was... If it was an apology, I don't think it went far enough, I think that if something isn't done now about him, I think the whole country is going to lose faith in the Conservative Party. I mean, I always used to vote Conservative, but I don't think anymore.
More than 25,000 people in Uxbridge voted for Boris Johnson at the last election. He has critics here, but also loyal supporters.
He has made a few mistakes, but he's also made lots of good judgments.
He shouldn't be allowed to get away with this because he's been allowed to get away with too much.
I happen to like Boris Johnson. I think the media are having a witch hunt against him.
Back at Westminster, Conservative MPs willing to pass judgment in public were thin on the ground.
Colleagues will want to see that the Prime Minister has learnt his lesson. They will also want to know exactly how he thought it was a work event when he now accepts it was a party. And I think, he clearly needs to make sure that he is seen by everybody to be taking responsibility for his actions.
Tonight, Cabinet members offered their support in messages on Twitter, but this crisis for Mr Johnson is far from over. Simon Harris, ITV News, Westminster.
Back to our political correspondent now. And Simon, the Prime Minister has admitted he was at the party, apologised for being there, yet he still claims he thought it was a work event. Do you think the Tory MPs and voters will accept his explanation?
Well, let's go back to what triggered this event, and it's that email linked to ITV News on Monday inviting 100 Downing Street staff to drinks in the back garden with the rider "Bring Your Own Booze." How does Boris Johnson square the circle? He says he thought it was a work event, but everyone else who was there came with alcohol. A lot of it bought, I'm told, from Tesco Express opposite Big Ben. Well, the first challenge, or immediate challenge rather, for Mr Johnson is to try to convince his backbenchers not to send in letters of no confidence to the 1922 committee. But the signs aren't looking good tonight. One senior Tory, Douglas Ross, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, has called for Mr Johnson to go.
Thank you, Simon.
Good evening. It was welcome news for many businesses across the capital tonight, with the Health Secretary revealing that COVID self-isolation can be reduced to 5 days with a negative test result. It's hoped the change will ease the issue of staff shortages, which affected many businesses at the tail end of last year because of Omicron. But for many of our bars and restaurants, the change is just too late for them to even begin to make up for the financial hit over Christmas. Our political correspondent Simon Harris has the latest.
London's beleaguered bars and restaurants have been crying out for help for weeks, so the cut to the self-isolation period from 7 to 5 days should have been greeted with the popping of champagne corks. But for some, it's come too late.
I think London is definitely through the worst of the Omicron variant pandemic phase, and that we had 18 people off the week before Christmas from a staff of 76, and we don't have anybody off sick at the moment.
A few streets away, they were getting ready for the evening rush at a tapas bar. In December, it was forced to close because too many staff had tested positive. Again, the new isolation period won't make much difference here.
Well, I don't think it will be a drastic change to our businesses, as majority of the staff are now back in. It was very difficult in December, however, now we're more or less up to speed. But it's still a very welcome change. We'll take any bit of positive news.
The 5-day rule was announced in the Commons by the Health Secretary.
UK HSA data shows that around 2/3 of positive cases are no longer infectious by the end of day 5. And we want to use the testing capacity that we've built up to help these people leave isolation safely.
His Labour Oppo couldn't resist welcoming the change tongue-in-cheek.
Great news for the Prime Minister, Mr Deputy Speaker, who through a terribly unfortunate coincidence of timing is isolating today, unable to face the cameras or the public. How good of the Secretary of State to help the Prime Minister back to work.
Central London isn't the ghost town it was, but work from home is still hurting many businesses. They're praying today's announcement is a step towards reversing Plan B. It appears the Omicron wave in London peaked 2 weeks ago. Since then, the number of new cases has dropped, even among the critical age group, the over 60s. There are fewer Londoners in hospital and fewer patients on ventilators. The London Assembly's Health Committee was given an update by the capital's top public health official.
Although there is a temptation to say that the worst is behind us, that may be true in terms of the peak. However, I'd like to draw the committee's attention to the fact that our rates are still phenomenally high. They're in excess now of 1,500 per 100,000. Again, that's more than 4 times higher than where we were before the wave started.
It'll be another 2 weeks before the government decides if it's safe to relax the Plan B restrictions. Simon Harris, ITV News, Central London.